How could my daughter be declared lost during childbirth without me ever seeing her once? Why did her husband's family block every question and rush me out of the hospital? What I overheard when I quietly returned that night explained everything, and ended their control in one move. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor made everything look sterile and unreal. I stood there holding a small bouquet of daisies, Lena's favorite since she was 8, and tried to make sense of what Caleb Rowan had just told me. She didn't make it through delivery, he said. His voice was flat. Too flat, like he'd rehearsed the words. I looked past him toward the maternity ward doors. I need to see her. That's not possible right now. Caleb, she's my daughter. His mother stepped between us before he could answer. Marjorie Rowan wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her expression held the kind of manufactured sympathy people use at charity events. Orion, we understand this is difficult, she said, but everything is being handled. The hospital staff has been wonderful. We've made all the necessary arrangements. Arrangements? The word felt wrong in my mouth. I just want to see Lena. That's not appropriate at this time. Franklin Rowan appeared behind his wife. His presence always filled a room, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man used to being obeyed. We're managing the situation through proper channels. I'd worked at the county legal bureau for 23 years. I knew what proper channels meant when someone wanted to delay or deflect. I also knew that fathers had visiting rights. Always. What about the baby? I asked. The three of them exchanged a look. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but I caught it. The baby didn't survive either, Marjorie said. We're all devastated, as you can imagine. A nurse walked past us, her eyes fixed on the floor. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd been on shift too long. When I tried to make eye contact, she turned away. I'd like to speak with her doctor, I said. Dr. Kellerman is with another patient, Caleb said quickly, too quickly. We've already discussed everything with him. Then I'll wait, Franklin's voice hardened. Orion, you're making this more difficult than it needs to be. We appreciate that you came, but the family needs privacy right now. I am family. You know what I mean. His tone made it clear I was being reclassified, downgraded. Lena was part of our household. We'll handle this. I thought about arguing, about pushing past them and finding someone, anyone, who would give me real answers. But I'd seen this play before. Rich family, hospital staff who knew which side of the liability line to stand on, a middle-aged man with a government salary and no lawyer standing beside him. So I nodded, let my shoulders slump a little, made myself look defeated. I understand, I said quietly. It's a lot to process. Marjorie's expression softened with what might have been genuine relief. We'll be in touch about the arrangements. Give us a few days. I turned toward the elevator, still holding the daisies. Behind me, I heard Marjorie say something to Caleb in a low voice. The words were too quiet to catch, but the tone was satisfied. Problem solved. Difficult person managed. The elevator doors closed on their composed faces. I rode down alone, replaying the timeline. Lena had texted me 3 days ago. Early labor. Brief. Normal. Going to hospital. We'll update soon. There were no updates. I'd called twice. Caleb answered both times, flat and controlled, saying everything was fine and I should wait. Now Lena was gone. The baby was gone. And I hadn't been allowed anywhere near them. I reached my car, an aging sedan, and sat without starting it. The garage smelled of oil and exhaust. A door slammed somewhere above. I opened my calendar, marked today with a red flag, then checked my recorder app. Battery at 73%. I stayed there for 20 minutes, watching the entrance in my mirror. People passed, staff, visitors. No one noticed a middle-aged man sitting quietly in an old car. At 8:47 p.m., I got out and walked back toward the hospital's side entrance near the employee break room, the one everyone knew stayed propped open. It was open. I went inside. Memories surfaced as I walked the dim service corridor, unwanted, persistent. Lena at 16, excited after meeting someone at a college prep event. Caleb Rowan was 21, already carrying himself like someone born into power. I'd been careful then, supportive but watchful. She was young, he was older, she was happy. By 18, she spent most weekends at the Rowan Estate in Greenfield Heights, a house with a pool, tennis court, wealth that announced itself quietly but unmistakably. I'd met Franklin and Marjorie 3 times. Each meeting felt like a performance review, polite questions about my county job, followed by distant nods, the kind reserved for people who keep things running but aren't meant to matter. Lena started calling less. Weekly became monthly. Always apologies, always explanations, family events, busy schedules, married life. I recognized the pattern from bureau files. Isolation is incremental. Missed calls, canceled visits. Always reasonable. Until you realize 6 months have passed and she hasn't called you once. The corridor opened near the cafeteria. After-hours silence, vending machines humming. A maintenance worker passed without looking. I'd learned that moving with purpose makes you invisible. I took the stairs to the 3rd floor. Maternity and intensive care. Elevators meant logs and scrutiny. Stairwells were quieter. The hallway was dim and still, smelling of disinfectant and wax. A TV murmured behind a door. Monitors beeped steadily. At the nurse station sat one person, the same young nurse from earlier, typing, tired and focused. I approached slowly, made sure my footsteps were audible so I wouldn't startle her. She looked up. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by something that might have been discomfort. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her name tag read N. Whitfield. "I'm looking for my daughter's room," I said. "Lena Carrick, or Lena Rowan, maybe. I'm not sure what name she's under." The nurse glanced at her computer screen, then back at me. Visiting hours ended at 8. "I know. I was here earlier, but I didn't get to see her. Her husband's family said she—" I let the sentence trail off. Let my voice crack a little. It wasn't hard. They said she didn't make it through delivery. Something changed in her expression. Not sympathy exactly, more like recognition of an uncomfortable truth. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said carefully. "I just need to see her, to say goodbye." She typed something, studied the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard like she was deciding whether to say something or not. "The family has requested privacy," she said finally. "I can't authorize visits outside the approved list." "Who's on the approved list?" "I can't share that information." I nodded slowly. Let the silence stretch. It was a technique I'd learned from watching lawyers depose witnesses. Sometimes people filled silence with more than they intended. "It's just unusual," she said after a moment. "Usually immediate family—" She stopped herself, shook her head. "I shouldn't say anything. It's not my place." "I understand." I stepped back from the counter. "Thank you for your time." I turned to leave, then paused like I'd just remembered something. "Actually, do you know if the family waiting room is still open? The one down by the ICU? I'd like to sit somewhere quiet for a few minutes before I go." "It should be open," she said. "End of the hall, turn left." I thanked her and walked in the direction she'd indicated. The corridor lights were dimmed for night mode. Most of the patient rooms had their doors partially closed. Through the gaps I could see the blue glow of monitors, hear the soft sounds of people sleeping or trying to. The ICU entrance was marked with double doors and a red sign about restricted access. The family waiting room was adjacent, a small space with uncomfortable chairs and a television mounted on the wall. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap I could hear voices. I recognized Marjorie Rowan's tone immediately. That carefully modulated authority she used when explaining things to people she considered beneath her intelligence level. "Completely contained," she was saying. "The hospital understands the sensitivity." He came back, though. That was Caleb. He sounded irritated. Just showed up demanding answers. "Of course he did." Franklin's voice. "But he left when asked. He's not going to push this." "You're sure?" Caleb again. "I've dealt with his type before," Franklin said. "Blue-collar bureaucrat. Plays by the rules because he doesn't know how to do anything else. He'll grieve quietly and move on." "What about the paperwork?" Marjorie asked. "Already handled. Transfer authorization was signed this morning. She's at the facility in Crestmont by now. Completely separate system. He'd have no way to trace it." My hand found my phone in my pocket. Found the voice recorder app. Pressed record without looking. "The timing was fortunate," Marjorie continued. "Early delivery gave us the window we needed. Another week, and he might have insisted on being present." "He has no legal standing," Franklin said. "Caleb is her husband. Medical decisions default to him." "Still." Marjorie's voice took on a cautious edge. "We should monitor the situation. If he starts asking questions through official channels—" "He won't," Franklin said confidently. "He's a filing clerk. He processes other people's legal actions. He doesn't initiate them." "Just a quiet clerk," Caleb said. There was contempt in his voice. "No connections, no resources. What's he going to do?" The conversation shifted to estate management and trust structures, terms I knew well from my work at the Bureau. They were discussing Lena's assets, her grandmother's house, the small trust fund she'd inherited at 25, all of it being folded into Rowan family control. I stayed in the hallway for 4 more minutes, recording everything. My hand was steady, my breathing quiet. Inside, something cold and precise was taking shape. When they stood to leave, I moved quickly toward the stairwell. The door closed behind me just as the waiting room door opened. I took the stairs down slowly, my phone still recording, now only footsteps and my own breathing. At the parking garage, I stopped the recording and checked the file. 7 minutes and 43 seconds. Then I drove home. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning. 2 bedrooms, one I used, one that had been Lena's before she moved out, small kitchen, living room with a couch I'd owned for 15 years. Everything clean and organized because I'd learned long ago that chaos in your environment leads to chaos in your thinking. I set my phone on the kitchen table and made coffee. Not because I needed it, the adrenaline was doing its job, but because the familiar routine helped me think. While the coffee brewed, I pulled out a yellow legal pad from the drawer where I kept work supplies. At the Bureau, we still used paper for preliminary case organization. Digital records came later, but initial mapping was always done by hand. There was something about writing that made patterns more visible. I drew a timeline across the top of the page. 3 days ago, Lena texts about early labor. 2 days ago, first call to Caleb. Everything's fine. Yesterday, second call to Caleb. Still monitoring her. Today, she didn't make it. Below the timeline, I wrote what I knew. Hospital staff deferred to Rowan family. Nurse appeared uncomfortable with situation. Lena's name still in hospital system. No one offered to let me see body. Transfer authorization mentioned, signed this morning. Facility in Crestmont. The coffee finished brewing. I poured a cup and sat down with the pad and my phone. I played the recording back 3 times, transcribing key phrases. My handwriting was steady and precise. 23 years of copying legal language had trained me to write clearly under any circumstance. Transfer authorization signed this morning. She's at the facility in Crestmont by now. Early delivery gave us the window we needed. Medical decisions default to him. I set down the pen and stared at what I'd written. They'd told me Lena was gone, didn't make it through delivery, expressed condolences, managed my grief. But they had also talked about transferring her, about a facility, about maintaining control. You don't transfer someone who didn't survive. The logical conclusion assembled itself without emotion. Lena was alive. The Rowans had moved her somewhere without my knowledge. They'd lied to my face and blocked my access because they knew I couldn't fight them, or thought I couldn't. I picked up the phone and opened my contacts, scrolled to Howard Bellows. He was one of the senior partners at the Bureau. Technically my supervisor, but we'd worked together long enough that the hierarchy had softened into something closer to colleague respect. It was after 10 p.m., late to call, but Howard had told me once that he preferred late calls to early ones because his mornings were for family and his evenings were for work that required thinking. He answered on the 3rd ring. Orion. Everything all right? I need advice, I said. Personal matter. Legal implications. Hold on. I heard movement, a door closing. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted into the careful precision he used for sensitive cases. Go ahead. I told him about the hospital, about Caleb and his parents blocking my access, about what they'd said regarding Lena not surviving. I didn't mention the recording yet. That would come later when I needed it. And you weren't allowed to see her? Howard asked when I finished. No, they said it wasn't appropriate, that they were handling everything through proper channels. Proper channels. Howard made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. That's interesting phrasing. Is it legal? Blocking a parent from seeing their adult child in a hospital? Depends on several factors. If the patient is conscious and capable, they control their own visitor access. If they're incapacitated, medical power of attorney typically goes to the spouse. What about if the patient is deceased? Silence on the line. Then? That's a different question. Next of kin usually includes parents. But if there's a spouse, they have priority for arrangements. Still, blocking you entirely seems... He paused. Unusual. What if I wanted to verify hospital records? Confirm what happened? You'd need to file a formal request with hospital administration. As a parent, you have some standing, but it gets complicated with HIPAA. They can deny the request if the spouse objects. I wrote formal request on the legal pad and underlined it. How long does a request take to process? I asked. Depends on the hospital. Usually a week or 2 for a response. longer if they need legal review. And if I filed it tomorrow? Tomorrow? Howard's voice sharpened with interest. Orion, what exactly are you planning? I just want to understand what happened to my daughter. Fair enough, but be careful. If the Rowan family has resources, and it sounds like they do, they'll have lawyers who specialize in making these things complicated. I know. Do you need a referral? I know some people who handle family law. Not yet, I said, but I'll let you know. We talked for another few minutes about procedural details. Howard offered his condolences, which I accepted with appropriate gratitude. When we hung up, I had 3 pages of notes. I spent the next hour researching Crestmont facilities online. There were 4 medical centers in Crestmont. 2 were general hospitals. 1 was a rehabilitation center. 1 was a private psychiatric facility called Meadowbrook Haven. The psychiatric facility had a section on their website about patient privacy and family access. It mentioned that admission required either voluntary consent or a medical professional's authorization for involuntary commitment. It also mentioned that visiting privileges could be restricted based on patient welfare. I bookmarked the page. Then I pulled up the County Legal Bureau's internal database, the one I had access to through my work credentials. I wasn't supposed to use it for personal matters, but I also knew that access logs weren't monitored unless someone flagged unusual activity. I searched for Franklin Rowan's name, found 6 references in property transfer documents, large holdings, multiple LLCs. 1 document referenced a family trust that included provisions for mental health care management. I printed the relevant pages and added them to my growing file. By midnight, I had a clear picture. The Rowans had resources, they had legal framework, they had control, but they'd also made a mistake. They'd assumed I would accept their story because I'd always been quiet, always been cooperative, always been the understanding father who knew his place. They'd underestimated what quiet competence could accomplish when properly motivated. I went to bed at 12:30 and slept for exactly 5 hours. When the alarm went off, I showered, dressed, and made breakfast. Toast and eggs. Coffee. The same routine I'd followed for 20 years. Then I drove to the hospital. The hospital administrative office opened at 8 a.m. I arrived at 7:55 and waited in my car until I saw the lights come on through the ground floor windows. At exactly 8, I walked through the main entrance and followed the signs to patient services. The woman behind the desk looked like she'd been doing this job for decades. Gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, a nameplate that read Virginia Mills. Good morning, I said. I'd like to file a formal request for medical records. She pulled out a form without looking up. Patient name? Lena Carrick, also possibly listed as Lena Rowan. That got her attention, and she looked up, studied my face for a moment, then glanced at her computer screen. Relationship to patient? Father. Do you have identification? I handed over my driver's license. She copied the information onto the form, then typed something into her computer. There's a note on this account, she said carefully. Family has requested restricted access to information. I'm aware. That's why I'm filing a formal request. I'm next of kin. The patient's spouse has already filed as primary next of kin. That doesn't eliminate my standing as a parent. I kept my voice even. Professional. I'm requesting verification of medical events and patient status. I'm not asking for treatment details or sensitive health information, just confirmation of what happened. Virginia Mills looked at me over her reading glasses. I could see her calculating. Difficult family situation. Potential legal implications. The kind of thing that could turn into a problem if handled wrong. I'll need to forward this to our legal department, she said. They'll respond within 10 business days. That's fine. I understand the process takes time. She finished filling out the form and had me sign in 3 places. When she handed me a copy, I folded it carefully and put it in my jacket pocket. Is there anything else? She asked. Yes. I'd like to file a complaint about visitor access protocols. Yesterday, I was denied the opportunity to see my daughter after being informed of her passing. No one explained the legal basis for that restriction. Her expression shifted. This was clearly a different category of problem. I see, she said slowly. That would be handled through patient advocacy. Different department. Can you direct me there? 3rd floor, suite 310. I thanked her and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Suite 310 was down the hall from where I'd been the night before. The irony wasn't lost on me. The patient advocacy office was smaller than administration. 1 desk, 1 man. His nameplate read Sage Reese. He listened carefully as I repeated the facts, typing notes without interrupting. I understand your frustration, he said, but the hospital must balance family requests with privacy regulations. I'm not disputing privacy. I'm questioning the legal basis for blocking a parent without notice or explanation. The patient's spouse made the request. Under what authority? If my daughter had passed, as I was told, denying a parent access to say goodbye feels exceptionally cruel. His expression softened. You're right. That is unusual. Let me review the specifics. May I have your contact information? I gave it to him. He promised a response within 48 hours. 2 formal requests filed, 2 paper trails started. I left the hospital and went to work. The county legal bureau sat near the courthouse. My shared office handled filings, deadlines, and archives. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me access and credibility. Howard stopped by mid-morning. You look tired. Didn't sleep. I asked him, hypothetically, what it would take to transfer a patient without family notification. If the patient has capacity, only their consent. If not, whoever holds medical power of attorney. And if the family was told the patient had passed, but the patient was actually transferred? That's fraud, possibly several kinds. You'd need hard evidence, medical records, transfer documents, witness testimony. He paused. Orion, is something going on? Not yet, but I may need your help. You have it. The rest of the day, I did my job, quietly filing paperwork. Between cases, I researched transfer protocols, patient rights, involuntary commitment procedures, and noted every hospital security camera I'd seen. At 4 p.m., an email arrived from Sage Reese. Hospital security logs show you were present on the 3rd floor outside approved hours. This has been noted. Please restrict future visits. Your advocacy request remains under review. They knew I'd come back. I archived the email. After work, I bought a backup phone battery and a small digital recorder with a timestamp. Then I went home and waited. The hospital administration response came 3 days later. Not the 10 business days Virginia Mills had mentioned. 3 days. Fast enough to signal that someone wanted this handled quickly. The letter was formal and brief. Dear Mr. Carrick, we have reviewed your request for medical records pertaining to Lena Rowan, formerly Lena Carrick. As the patient's spouse has filed as primary next of kin and requested restricted access to all medical information, we are unable to fulfill your request without his written authorization. We suggest you contact Mr. Caleb Rowan directly to discuss any questions regarding the patient's care and status. Our condolences during this difficult time. The letter was signed by someone in legal affairs. Not Sage Reese, not Virginia Mills, someone higher up the chain. I read it 3 times, analyzing every word. Patient's care and status. Not former patient. Not deceased patient's care. Care and status. Present tense. I made a copy of the letter and added it to my file, which now included the audio recording from the hospital waiting room, my timeline and notes. Hospital formal request documentation, research on Crestmont facilities, property records for Franklin Rowan, the patient advocacy follow-up email, this new response letter, everything organized, everything dated, everything building toward a single conclusion that I could prove. That afternoon, I drove to Crestmont. It was 45 minutes away, a smaller town with a main street that still had independent shops and a medical complex on the north side. I didn't go to Meadowbrook Haven directly. Instead, I parked at a coffee shop across the street and sat by the window with a newspaper and a cup of coffee I didn't drink. The facility was surrounded by a fence. Not a high fence, just enough to mark boundaries and probably satisfy insurance requirements. The main building was modern, lots of windows, landscaping that tried to look residential rather than institutional. I watched for an hour, saw a few people come and go. Staff, probably. 1 delivery truck. No one who looked like a patient. Then I drove back to the hospital. This time I parked in visitor parking and walked straight to security. The desk was staffed by a man in his 50s with a military bearing and a nameplate that read E. Crane, Supervisor. Can I help you? He asked. I hope so. My name is Orion Carrick. I filed some requests with patient services about my daughter, Lena Rowan. I understand there's been a note made about my access to certain areas. Elliot Crane studied me for a moment, then typed something into his computer. You were on the 3rd floor outside authorized hours, he said. That's a violation of hospital policy. I understand. I apologize for that. I wasn't thinking clearly. I'd just been told my daughter had passed and I wanted to see her. When I couldn't during regular hours, I made a poor decision. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. I'm trying to understand what happened, to get some closure. The family has been difficult to communicate with. I was hoping you might be able to help me understand the access protocols. What specifically do you want to know? If a patient is deceased, what's the standard procedure for family viewing? Are there restrictions? Typically, no. If the family wants to view the deceased, we coordinate with the morgue or the funeral home if the body's been transferred. Unless there's a medical examiner's hold, family can request viewing. And if there's a dispute between family members, then we usually defer to whoever has legal authority. Spouse, if there is one, otherwise parents. I see. I paused, as if considering something. Is there a log of patient transfers? Like if someone is moved from this facility to another one? Elliot Crane's expression shifted. Not much, but enough. Why do you ask? I'm just trying to understand the full picture. When patients are transferred, does security maintain records? We maintain entry and exit logs for all patient movements. Transfer documentation is handled by medical records. Would those logs include where someone was transferred to? They would note that a transfer occurred. The destination facility would be in the medical transfer paperwork. I nodded slowly. Thank you, that's helpful. Mr. Carrick. He leaned forward slightly. Can I ask you something off the record? Of course. Do you believe your daughter is actually deceased? The question hung in the air between us. I could see him watching my reaction carefully. This was a test, or maybe it was an offer of alliance. Hard to tell. I don't know what to believe, I said honestly. I've been told she's gone, but I haven't seen her, haven't been given any real details, and the way her husband's family has handled everything feels... I shook my head. Wrong. It feels wrong. Elliot Crane was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my direct number, he said, handing it to me. If you need to verify anything about hospital procedures or access logs, call me, not the main line, me directly. Thank you. I've been doing this job for 16 years. I can usually tell when something doesn't add up. He met my eyes. What you're describing doesn't add up. I left the hospital with his card in my pocket and a new piece of the puzzle in place. Security supervisor uncomfortable with the situation, willing to help if asked directly. That evening, I called Caleb's cell phone. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Caleb, it's Orion. I've been trying to get some information about Lena's arrangements. I'd like to know where the service will be held, and I'd like to see her, if possible, before... My voice actually did break this time, not from grief, from anger held carefully in check. Please call me back. He didn't call back. 2 days later, Marjorie Rowan sent me an email, formal, impersonal. Dear Orion, we understand this is a difficult time. The family has decided to hold a private service. We ask that you respect our need for privacy during this period. We will let you know when arrangements are finalized. Private service. Indefinite timeline. Translation. You're not invited. I responded with equal formality. Marjorie, I would like to discuss this in person. Please let me know when you're available. No response. I gave it 3 more days. Used the time to build my documentation file and prepare the next stage. Then I called Howard Bellows and asked if he had an hour to review something sensitive. We met at his house after dinner. His wife brought us coffee and left us alone in his home office, a room lined with law books and case files. I handed him the folder I'd assembled, watched his face as he read through the timeline, the notes, the formal requests and responses. When he reached the transcription of the overheard conversation, he looked up sharply. You recorded this? Yes. Do they know? No. He kept reading. When he finished, he set the folder down and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between respect and concern. This is explosive, he said. If you're right, if they falsely reported her passing and moved her without your knowledge, this isn't just civil liability. This could be criminal. I know. You're also dealing with people who have resources. They can make your life very difficult. They already have. Howard stood and paced to the window. What do you want to happen here? I want the truth on record. I want Lena found and safe, and I want them to answer for what they've done. Then you need to force their hand. File a missing person report with the police. Use the recording to establish that she's alive. Request a welfare check at Meadowbrook Haven based on the conversation you documented. Will the police take me seriously? Maybe, maybe not, but it creates another official record, another pressure point. And if they refuse to investigate, that becomes evidence of institutional failure. What if I go directly to the hospital administration, present everything at once, and demand answers? Howard turned back to face me. That's risky. You'll only get one shot at that. If you play your hand too early, they'll close ranks and lock you out completely. But if I wait too long, They might move her again. True. He thought for a moment. You need leverage. Something that makes them more afraid of you going public than they are of you knowing the truth. The recording. Partly. But you also need institutional witnesses. People who can testify that the records don't match the story. He picked up the folder again. This email from patient advocacy, the one mentioning that you were on the 3rd floor outside visiting hours, that's actually helpful. How? Because it confirms you were there. It establishes a timeline. And if we can get the security logs from that night... He smiled slightly. How's your relationship with that security supervisor? Cooperative. Then that's your next step. Get the official log of your entry and exit times. Get the log of any patient transfers from that day, and get confirmation of whether Lena Carrick or Lena Rowan is listed as deceased in their system. He can access all that. If he wants to, and if he's as uncomfortable with this situation as you say, he'll want to. I called Elliot Crane the next morning, asked if I could meet with him briefly. He suggested I come by the hospital around 3 p.m. when his shift started. I arrived exactly on time. He led me to a small office behind the security desk and closed the door. What do you need? He asked. I explained everything, showed him the documentation, played him the recording. His expression darkened as he listened. They told you she was gone, he said when the recording ended. But they're talking about transfers and facilities. Oh, yes. And you think she's at Meadowbrook Haven? I think it's likely. He turned to his computer, typed for several minutes without speaking. Then he pulled up what looked like a spreadsheet and turned the monitor toward me. These are the patient transfer logs for the day you mentioned. 3 transfers total. 2 went to other hospitals for specialized care. 1 went to a private facility in Crestmont. My heart rate picked up. Can you see the patient name? No, that's protected health information. I can see that a transfer occurred, who authorized it, and what time it happened. He pointed to the screen. This one was authorized by Dr. Kellerman at 9:47 a.m. Transfer completed at 11:15 a.m. That's Lena's doctor. I remember. The Rowan family mentioned him. Can you print this? Elliot Crane hesitated. Officially, no, but I can print my own notes about reviewing system discrepancies. He printed 2 pages and handed them to me. These are for my records. If you happen to photograph them for your records, that's your business. I took pictures with my phone while he watched. One more thing, he said. I checked the deceased patient log. No entry for Lena Carrick or Lena Rowan on the day in question. Meaning? Meaning if she passed, there's no official record of it here. I added the photographs to my digital file and drove home feeling like the walls were finally closing in on the truth. That night, I filed a missing person report with the police, listed all the relevant facts, attached copies of my documentation, made it clear that I believed my daughter was alive and being held without proper legal authority. The officer who took the report was polite but skeptical. Sir, if her husband says she passed and the hospital confirmed it... The hospital hasn't confirmed anything, I said. They've refused to provide records, and I have evidence suggesting she was transferred to another facility. What kind of evidence? I played him the recording. His skepticism vanished. I'll need to file this with detectives, he said. This is above my authority level. I understand. 2 days later, a detective called, asked me to come in for a formal interview. I brought everything, the folder, the recordings, the timeline, every piece of documentation I'd assembled. The detective's name was Lauren Price. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she took her job seriously. She listened to everything, took notes, asked clarifying questions, played the recording twice. This is concerning, she said when I finished. But I need to be honest with you. Getting a warrant to check on a patient at a private facility based on a recording of a conversation is difficult, especially when the family in question has resources for legal pushback. What would you need to make it easier? Something more concrete. Testimony from hospital staff. Documentation that directly contradicts their story, or... She paused. Or you could request the hospital administration to hold a formal review meeting. Bring all this evidence to them directly and see how they respond. Won't they just deny everything? Maybe, but they'll have to do it on record, with witnesses. And if they lie during an institutional review, that's actionable. It was the same conclusion Howard had reached. Force their hand. Make them respond publicly. How do I request that? I asked. Write to the hospital CEO. Explain that you have evidence of discrepancies regarding your daughter's care and status. Request a formal meeting to address your concerns. They're required to take that seriously. And if they refuse? Then you have more evidence of institutional failure. and that makes everything else easier to pursue. I wrote the letter that night, kept it professional but firm, listed the discrepancies, mentioned the formal requests I'd already filed and the lack of satisfactory responses, requested a meeting with hospital administration and all relevant parties to resolve the matter, sent it via email and certified mail. The response came faster than I expected. 4 days later. Dear Mr. Carrick, we take your concerns seriously. We have scheduled a meeting for next Monday at 2 p.m. in our administrative conference room. Please bring any documentation you wish to present. Hospital legal counsel will be present. You may bring legal representation if you choose. I forwarded the email to Howard and Detective Price. Then I called Elliot Crane and asked if he would be willing to attend if requested. As a witness, he asked, as someone who can confirm the security logs and hospital protocols. I'll be there. The pieces were all in place, the meeting was scheduled, the evidence was organized, the witnesses were ready. I spent the weekend preparing my presentation, rehearsing what I would say, anticipating their responses, and trying not to think about what it would mean if I was wrong. But I wasn't wrong. I knew I wasn't wrong. The recording didn't lie. The timeline didn't lie. The absence of documentation didn't lie. Lena was alive. The Rowans had hidden her. And in 3 days, I was going to prove it. Monday arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully, suit and tie, the kind I wore for official bureau functions. Professional, serious, someone who belonged in a conference room discussing legal matters. I arrived at the hospital 15 minutes early with my folder and a small digital recorder in my jacket pocket. The administrative conference room was on the second floor, larger than I expected, with a long table and 8 chairs. Howard Bellows was already there, along with Elliot Crane. They both nodded when I entered. You ready? Howard asked quietly. Yes. At exactly 2 p.m., the door opened and 4 people entered. I recognized 2 of them, Virginia Mills from Patient Services and Sage Reese from Advocacy. The other 2 introduced themselves as Mariah Walsh, Hospital Legal Counsel, and Dr. Richard Kellerman, Lena's doctor. We all sat. Mariah Walsh took the head of the table. Mr. Carrick, thank you for coming. We understand you have concerns about your daughter's care. We'd like to hear your perspective. I pulled out the folder and set it on the table. 3 weeks ago, I received a text from my daughter saying she'd gone into early labor. When I arrived at the hospital the following day, I was told by her husband and his family that she had not survived the delivery. I paused, watching their faces. Professional attention, nothing more. I asked to see her. I was told that wasn't possible. When I pushed for answers, I was asked to leave. I opened the folder and pulled out the timeline. I left, but something didn't feel right. So I came back that evening and overheard a conversation. I looked at Sage Reese. You noted in your email that I was on the 3rd floor outside normal visiting hours. That's correct. I was there. Mr. Carrick, Mariah Walsh said carefully, violating hospital policy. I'm not disputing that I violated policy. I'm explaining why, because what I heard that night contradicted everything I'd been told. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. This is a recording of that conversation. The room went very still. I pressed play. The voices filled the conference room. Marjorie's carefully modulated authority. Franklin's confidence. Caleb's contempt. Transfer authorization was signed this morning. She's at the facility in Crestmont by now. Early delivery gave us the window we needed. He's just a quiet clerk. What's he going to do? I watched Dr. Kellerman's face drain of color. When the recording ended, silence hung heavy in the room. That conversation describes my daughter being transferred to a facility. Alive. Not deceased, as I was told. I pulled out the next document. I filed a formal request for medical records. Your response letter mentioned the patient's care and status, present tense, not deceased patient? Virginia Mills looked down at her hands. I also spoke with your security supervisor. I nodded toward Elliot Crane. Elliot Crane pulled out his own folder. There was one transfer to a private facility in Crestmont on that date, authorized by Dr. Kellerman at 9:47 a.m. There is no entry in the deceased patient log for anyone matching Lena Carrick or Lena Rowan's description. Dr. Kellerman started to speak, then stopped. His hands were shaking. Dr. Kellerman, Mariah Walsh said sharply, is this true? Did you authorize a transfer? I was told it was in the patient's best interest, that the family felt she needed specialized care. Was she deceased? I asked. No. His voice was barely audible. No, she was alive, weak but stable. The room erupted. Mariah Walsh demanding explanations, Virginia Mills pulling up records, Sage Reese taking notes with furious intensity. I sat quietly and waited. Mr. Carrick, Murray Walsh said finally, if what you're suggesting is true, if a patient was transferred without proper notification and you were deliberately misled, that's serious. But I need more than a recording. Then verify it, I said. Call Meadowbrook Haven. Confirm whether Lena Carrick is a patient there. Murray Walsh stared at me, then picked up her phone. She stepped into the hallway. We could hear her voice through the door. Professional, increasingly sharp. She came back 5 minutes later. Lena Rowan is currently a patient at Meadowbrook Haven, she said, admitted 3 weeks ago. The admitting authorization was signed by her husband. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Under what grounds? Howard asked. The intake coordinator said it was voluntary, but the authorization included a request that visitor access be restricted to immediate family only, specifically her husband. Not her father? No. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. I want to see her, I said. Mr. Carrick? I want to see my daughter. Today, now. Murray Walsh exchanged glances with Dr. Kellerman and Howard. I'll make some calls. It took 2 hours. Phone calls, consultations, legal reviews. But finally, Murray Walsh returned. Meadowbrook Haven has agreed to a supervised visit. 1 hour. Medical staff will be present. I understand. We'll be filing an incident report about this situation, and will be cooperating with any law enforcement investigation. I stood. Thank you. Howard and I drove to Crestmont together. Elliot Crane followed in his own car. Meadowbrook Haven looked different up close. The landscaping was professional, but generic. The building had that careful neutrality common to places that dealt with mental health. We were met at the entrance by a staff member who introduced herself as the patient advocate. She led us through security to a private meeting room. Your daughter has been informed you're here, she said. She's agreed to see you. The door opened. Lena walked in. She was thinner than I remembered. Tired. But she was alive. Standing. Real. When she saw me, her face crumpled. Dad. I crossed the room and pulled her into a hug. She was shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. They said you didn't want to see me. They said you'd agreed I needed help. That's a lie. I pulled back to look at her face. I've been looking for you for 3 weeks. They told me you were gone. Gone? They said you didn't survive the delivery. Her eyes went wide. What? No, She looked at the advocate. Can I talk to my father alone? The advocate hesitated, then nodded. I'll be right outside. When the door closed, Lena sat down heavily. I took the chair beside her. Tell me what happened, I said. She took a shaky breath. The baby didn't make it, but I was okay, physically. Then Caleb said I was being transferred somewhere I could rest, that I needed specialized care. Did you agree to come here? I signed papers, but I wasn't really processing anything. I just lost the baby, and Caleb kept saying this was what was best, that his parents had arranged it. She looked at me. I believed them. Did they tell you I was asking about you? No. They said you'd called, but that you were giving me space. She started crying quietly. I believed them. Why wouldn't I? I held her hand and waited. When she could speak again, she said, I want to leave. I want to go home. We'll make that happen. The patient advocate returned. Lena told her clearly that she wanted to discharge herself, that she'd been admitted under false pretenses and no longer consented to treatment. There were forms, consultations, legal language. Lena signed everything. 3 hours after arriving, I walked out with my daughter beside me. I drove Lena to my apartment. She sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window without speaking. When we got inside, she looked around at the small space. You kept my room, she said quietly. Of course I did. That night, I made her soup and tea. She ate a little. Mostly we just sat in comfortable silence. Around 10 p.m., her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went pale. It's Caleb. You don't have to answer. She declined the call. It rang again immediately. She declined it again. A text message appeared. Where are you? The facility called. Come home now. She showed me the message. I photographed it. Another text. You're making a mistake. Dad says there will be consequences. I took her phone and turned it off. No more tonight, I said. She nodded and went to her room. I sat in the kitchen and sent 3 messages. To Howard. Found her. She's safe. Thank you. To Elliot Crane. She's home. Appreciate everything. To Detective Price. Lena is safe with me. She confirms false pretenses. Call me when ready for her statement. All 3 responded within minutes. I made one more call. to the hospital administration. Left a voicemail for Mariah Walsh. This is Orion Carrick. My daughter has been safely discharged and is with me. She's confirmed she was admitted under false pretenses and that her family deliberately misled both her and me. I'll be cooperating fully with any investigations. Then I sat in the quiet apartment and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 weeks. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just the simple, overwhelming relief of having my daughter back. The next morning started with phone calls from Caleb. 6 calls between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m., all declined. Finally, a voicemail. Orion, this is Caleb. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to bring Lena back right now. She's not well. She needs professional care. If you don't comply, we'll be forced to take legal action. I saved the voicemail and added it to my file. Lena emerged from her room around 8, wearing one of my old sweatshirts. Did he call? She asked. Several times. What did you tell him? Nothing. I didn't answer. She poured coffee and sat at the kitchen table. They're going to come here, aren't they? Probably. What do we do? We talked to Detective Price this afternoon. Get everything on record. Make sure you're legally protected. I sat across from her. But first, tell me when things started getting difficult? She was quiet for a long time. About a year after we got married. Little things at first. He didn't like when I talked to you, said it made him feel like I wasn't prioritizing our marriage. Then it was my friends. He'd find reasons why I shouldn't see them. Did you try to talk to him about it? Yes. But he'd turn it around, make it seem like I was being unreasonable. His parents backed him up. What about the pregnancy? Her hands tightened around the mug. When I got pregnant, it got worse. Everything was about the baby, what I ate, where I went, who I talked to. Caleb said it was for my health. And you believed him? I wanted to. I was scared about being a mom, and they were all so confident. She looked up at me. When I lost the baby, I felt like it was my fault, and they reinforced that. That's manipulation. I know that now. Her voice was barely audible. At 2 p.m., we met Detective Price at the police station. She'd arranged a private interview room. Lena told her story slowly and carefully. Detective Price took notes and recorded the conversation with Lena's permission. This is complex, she said when Lena finished. Medically speaking, you were admitted voluntarily. That makes it harder to prove false imprisonment. But I was misled, Lena said. They told me my father knew, that he supported it. That's not true. And they told your father you were deceased. That's definitely fraud. Detective Price looked at me. The recording you provided is helpful. Combined with Ms. Carrick's testimony, we have grounds for investigation. What happens next? I asked. We'll interview the Rowan family, Dr. Kellerman, hospital staff, build a case for filing charges. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. These things move slowly. Lena's face fell. So they just get away with it in the meantime? No, we're opening an active investigation. That creates legal pressure. Detective Price leaned forward. And Ms. Carrick, you can file for a restraining order. Given the circumstances, a judge would likely grant it. I want to do that, Lena said immediately. We spent another hour filling out paperwork. By the time we left the station, it was almost 5 p.m. As we walked to the car, Lena's expression was thoughtful. Dad, she said, I want to file for annulment, not just divorce. I want it on record that this marriage was based on deception. That's your right. Will you help me? Of course. We drove home in comfortable silence. When we pulled into the apartment parking lot, I noticed a black Mercedes parked near the entrance. Franklin Rowan stood beside it. Stay in the car, I told Lena. Dad, lock the doors. Call Detective Price if anything happens. I got out and walked toward Franklin. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. His expression was carefully neutral. Orion, he said, we need to talk. No, we don't. You've created a very difficult situation. For everyone. I've corrected a lie. That's not the same thing. He stepped closer. Not threatening exactly, but using his height and presence to intimidate. Lena is fragile right now. She needs proper care. What you're doing, taking her from a medical facility against professional advice, that's reckless. She discharged herself voluntarily. She's an adult. She's not thinking clearly. The facility was helping her process her loss. By isolating her from her family, by telling her I didn't want to see her. Franklin's expression flickered. We did what we thought was best. You lied to her. You lied to me. You told me she was gone. That was a miscommunication. I have a recording that says otherwise. His jaw tightened. Recording private conversations is illegal in many circumstances. Not in semi-public hospital spaces. I've already provided it to law enforcement. Then you've made this a legal matter. Fine. We have resources. We can tie this up in court for years. Go ahead. I have documentation, witness testimony, hospital records that contradict your story, and I have Lena herself ready to testify about what you did. She's unstable. She's clear-headed and coherent, and she's filing for annulment. Also a restraining order against your son. Franklin's composure cracked. You're destroying this family. No. You did that when you decided my daughter was property to be managed instead of a person with rights. Caleb loves her. Caleb isolated her, controlled her, and when she lost the baby, he used her grief as an excuse to lock her away. I stepped closer. That's not love. That's abuse. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're used to getting what you want because you have money and influence. But this time, the law is on my side. The evidence is on my side. And most importantly, Lena is on my side. Franklin stared at me for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. We need to discuss strategy, he said to whoever answered. The situation has become complicated. He walked back to his Mercedes without another word. The car pulled away smoothly. I returned to my car. Lena was pale but composed. What did he say? She asked. Threats, posturing, nothing that matters. We went upstairs. I made dinner while Lena sat at the kitchen table, processing everything. I was so stupid, she said quietly. You weren't stupid. You trusted people who presented themselves as trustworthy. I should have called you more, stayed in touch. They made that difficult deliberately. That's on them, not you. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what happens if they do tie this up in court for years? Then we fight for years. I'm not going anywhere. The next morning, we met with a family law attorney Howard had recommended. Her name was Patricia Odom, and she had 30 years of experience with high-conflict annulment cases. She listened to Lena's story without interrupting, reviewed the documentation I'd assembled, made notes in precise handwriting. This is strong, she said finally. The deception regarding your father's knowledge and consent creates grounds for annulment based on fraud. Combined with the false imprisonment elements, we can build a compelling case. How long will it take? Lena asked. With their resources? They'll fight. But the evidence is clear. 6 months to a year, most likely. And the restraining order? We'll file tomorrow. Given the circumstances, I'd expect approval within a week. We left the attorney's office with a plan. File the annulment petition, file the restraining order, cooperate with the criminal investigation, and wait. Waiting was harder than I expected, not because I doubted the outcome, but because I could see Lena struggling. She was safe, but she was also grieving, for the baby, for the marriage she'd thought she had, for the time she'd lost. I gave her space when she needed it, and I was there when she needed that instead. Detective Price called a week later with an update. We've interviewed Dr. Kellerman and several hospital staff members. Everyone confirms the basic facts of your case. The Rowan family is claiming it was a misunderstanding, but their story keeps changing. Are you filing charges? The district attorney is reviewing. Likely charges will include fraud, false reporting, and possibly custodial interference. It'll take time to build the full case. But it's moving forward? Yes, definitely. The restraining order was approved. Caleb was prohibited from contacting Lena directly or through third parties. Prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her. He violated it within 3 days. Lena and I were at the grocery store when it happened. She was in the produce section, comparing apples, when I saw Caleb walking toward us from the far end of the aisle. Lena, I said quietly, don't turn around. Walk toward the front of the store. What? Caleb's here. Go to the manager's office and tell them to call the police. I'll handle this. She went pale but nodded, moved quickly toward the checkout lanes. I turned to face Caleb. He looked worse than I'd seen him before. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, eyes that didn't quite focus properly. You ruined everything, he said. You need to leave. There's a restraining order. I don't care about that. I need to talk to her. That's not happening. She's my wife. Not for much longer. He lunged forward. Not gracefully, more like someone who'd been drinking and wasn't thinking clearly. I stepped aside and he stumbled into a display of canned goods. A store manager appeared. Sir, I need you to leave immediately or I'm calling the police. They're already being called, I said. Caleb scrambled to his feet. This isn't over. My father will. Your father can't save you from violating a court order. He stared at me with something between hatred and desperation. Then he turned and ran toward the exit. Police arrived 7 minutes later. I gave them a statement. The store manager provided security footage showing Caleb approaching us deliberately. "We'll pick him up," the officer said. "Violation of a restraining order is taken seriously." They arrested Caleb that evening at his parents' estate. He spent the night in jail before posting bond. The violation added weight to our case, showed a pattern of refusing to respect boundaries or legal authority. 2 weeks later, we got news from Detective Price. The district attorney is moving forward with charges. Franklin Rowan, Marjorie Rowan, and Caleb Rowan are all being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and false reporting. Dr. Kellerman is being charged as an accessory. "When?" I asked. "Arraignment is scheduled for next month." Lena exhaled slowly when I told her. "It's really happening." "Yes." "What if they win?" "They won't. The evidence is too clear." The annulment hearing came first. Patricia Odom presented our case methodically. The recording, the hospital documentation, Lena's testimony about the deception. The Rowan family's attorney argued that it had been a miscommunication, that they'd acted in Lena's best interest, that she'd been emotionally unstable. The judge wasn't impressed. "The evidence shows a deliberate pattern of deception," he said. "The annulment is granted on grounds of fraud." Lena squeezed my hand when the gavel fell. The criminal trial took longer. Months of preparation, witness testimony, expert analysis of the hospital records and transfer documentation. I watched from the gallery as the case unfolded, watched the Rowan family's carefully constructed defense crumble under the weight of evidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The courthouse was more crowded than I expected. Journalists, curious observers, people who'd followed the case. Lena sat beside me in the front row. She'd been nervous that morning, but now she seemed calm, resolved. The Rowans entered with their attorneys. Franklin's expression was carefully blank. Marjorie looked smaller somehow. Caleb wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. The judge reviewed the verdict and the sentencing recommendations. Then he spoke directly to the defendants. "This case represents a profound abuse of trust and authority. You used your resources and influence to deceive, manipulate, and control. You showed no regard for Ms. Carrick's autonomy or well-being. You caused immeasurable harm to a family." Franklin Rowan, 3 years. Marjorie Rowan, 2 years. Caleb Rowan, 5 years. Dr. Kellerman, 18 months and loss of medical license. The sentences fell like hammers. When it was over, Lena and I walked out of the courthouse together into bright afternoon sunlight. Reporters called questions, but we didn't stop. We got in the car and drove away. "It's finished?" she said quietly. "Yes." "How do you feel?" I thought about it. About 3 weeks of searching. About the recording that changed everything. About quiet competence defeating loud control. "Satisfied," I said. She smiled. A real smile. The first one I'd seen in months. We drove to the apartment. I made coffee. We sat in the kitchen the way we used to, years ago, before everything got complicated. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up. I'm your father. I'll never give up." She reached across the table and took my hand. Outside, the afternoon light slanted through the windows. The city moved on with its business. Life continued. Inside, we sat in comfortable silence. Everything they'd tried to take from us, our relationship, our truth, our justice, we'd taken back, and we'd won.